Good evening. Hey, we're going to be doing some interacting tonight, some with me, some with each other, which is why I gave you chocolate to start. And there's more chocolate. If you want extras, just raise your hand. I'll throw them out to you. But there will be a chocolate eating exercise later on as part of the happiness strategies we're going to go over. I'm really happy to be here. As Allison said, my wife and I moved here a couple years ago. We've gotten to know Chad Chriselle through our kids who are the same age and were born within, I think, weeks of each other. So I have a fond spot for Chad and his family in my heart. And I do have a practice in town. I work a lot with men. Hearing you say that, Allison, reminds me, or it makes me aware that most of the men I work with are just guys who are going through stuff that I've been through. So it's a bit autobiographical what I do. But I'm here tonight to tell you about happiness and my understanding of the psychology of happiness. There are different angles to understand happiness from, but this is the one that I'm versed in, and I think I'm going to give you some information that will be interesting, probably intriguing, and ultimately very helpful as you try to implement some strategies to boost your own happiness. And I will say that the happiness I'm talking about isn't short-term. I mean, these are strategies that have been, I would say, empirically investigated and have effects that are long-term, meaning 3-6 months plus, after an intervention is done. So I will give you a handout at the end which has a list of these, but if you want to take notes, you've got pens. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm getting a cold, so if you can't hear me, raise your hand. We're good? Yeah, okay. So let's start with a question that I think kind of sets us in the right direction. What do you think would make you happier? I'll just open it up as a broad question to start with, then I'm going to ask you some specific examples. What do you think would make you happier in your life right now?
If we did had a different president.
Okay. Okay. So having a different president might make you happy. Yeah. What else? What would make you happier? What do you think?
Well, I know logically that the happiness should lie inside myself, but I think what would make me happier is if I lived somewhere in a very temperate climate and was on the ocean again.
You could.
And I love the beautiful Asheville Mountains, but I'm a water baby.
You couldn't have picked a better one to lead with. Great, great, yeah. Warmer climates, sunny beaches. Oh, I'd be so happy there, yeah. Hello. What else would make you happy? What are you yearning for that you don't have right now that you think would make you happier? What about support from the people I love? Yeah, maybe being in a relationship even, or having an improvement in your relationship. What do you think? If you lost some weight, a substantial amount, or gained the weight that you want to gain, would that make you happier? Yeah, perhaps. What if you looked so beautiful that people just stopped in their tracks? This woman won a beauty competition in the UK a few years ago. She was deemed had the most, I think, symmetry was part of the beauty kind of criteria, and this is the woman who won that. So if you think you looked better, you think that might make you happier? Younger, more youthful? Perhaps, yeah. What if you won millions of dollars? What if you hit the jackpot? Yeah, I'm in for that one. Yeah. Some no, maybe some yes. Yeah. So we all have these ideas about things that are going to make us happy, right? But what we find, what the research shows, is that the effects of these things are really small. And they're actually very temporary, so they don't last very long. We'll get into some more details about that. And when we at least look at the kind of popularized media versions of happiness and consider what really makes us happy, we see that we're actually looking, or we're told to look for happiness in places that really don't yield it for the long term. And that's where the field of positive psychology is really helpful, which is really the basis of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Has anyone heard of positive psychology before? No? Oh, okay. All right. So positive psychology really seeks to answer this question, what is happiness? And it says, first of all, happiness is an unwieldy scientific term. And positive psychology researchers break it down into 3 major constituents, meaning, pleasure, and engagement. And by studying the happiest people that they can find, they find that the people who actively live out meaning, engagement, and pleasure in their life consistently have high happiness scores that are far greater than the rest of us do. Right? So we're going to talk about activities that boost meaning and pleasure and engagement. And I think this is, if you can try to blaze this into your mind, these are the 3 components of happiness according to positive psychology. Again, this isn't happiness in this very esoteric, amorphous, kind of untouchable way. These are activities that you find very meaningful, activities that really capture your attention and your engagement, activities where you find you're just immersed in pleasure. These are the aspects of happiness we're talking about. So the happiest people, pass over that slide, endorse these habits, and we're going to get into a lot of these tonight. So they nurture their relationships. They devote time to the people that they love. They express gratitude for the things that they have. They're not so consumed about what they don't have or getting that $1 million paycheck. They help other people. They're generous. They take care of their neighbors and their coworkers. They practice thinking positively about the future. They savor the moments that they live in. And you can read the rest. They exercise. They're committed to their goals. They cope well with challenges. Now, I don't know of a person who scores high on all these all the time. But I think these serve as good aspiration points as we're considering how we can boost our own happiness. Interestingly, there are some things that are not necessary for happiness that some of us might think are. And I just want to dissuade you of these ideas. So one would be deep, as a therapist it's hard for me to say this, but deep, long-lasting psychotherapy is not necessary for you to be a happy person. Right? Dissecting your relationship habits is not necessary for you to be a happy person. Having a bigger paycheck is actually not necessary for your happiness. Youthfulness, beauty, losing weight, etc. So what does determine happiness? There are three main things that determine our happiness. I'm going to tell you what they are, and I'm going to have you guess which proportion of the pie chart they represent. This is 50%, 40%, and 10%. The first one is genetics. How many of you think that genetics comprises, let's say, 50% of our happiness? Some of you. How many of you think genetics comprises 40% of our happiness? A couple more. And what about for 10%? Some there. Yeah, so you might be surprised to know that genetics account for 50% of our happiness. If you are a happy person, good for you. You've got most of this portion all filled up. My wife is over here. She's just a bubbly, kind of cheerful person, which is why I love her. I'm probably, maybe a tenth of this is filled up for me. Like, by my nature, I'm kind of sullen, melancholy, and cranky, so I have to work at happiness, unlike her. There's some fascinating research done at the University of Minnesota. There's what's called the Minnesota Twin Registry. Has anyone heard of this? Some have. Catalogs twin sets that were born from the mid-30s to the mid-50s. And there's lots of different ways that researchers have analyzed their lifestyles, their choices, their biological makeup. One of the conclusions that's drawn is that if you imagine, is anyone here a twin? Identical?
No.
Close enough. Okay, that's fine. If you imagine identical twins, right, biologically the same, if they somehow are separated at birth and have very different lives, the best predictor, let's say if we're twins, right, the best predictor of my happiness is not my lifestyle. The best predictor of my happiness is her happiness as my twin. The biology factor makes up 50% of our happiness score. So I could have $1 million every day. I could, I could have this, fabulous life. But if my twin is miserable, chances are my happiness is going to be low based on biology. Okay, so it kind of leads to this idea of a happiness set point, which is similar to having like a set point for weight. That for a lot of us, our weight, once we reach early adulthood, our weight more or less stays within a certain range unless we have some real health crisis or make great attempts to bulk up or to slim down. Our weight's going to be more or less the same over the course of our lifetime. So happiness is like that. There's a genetic component that's so strong, we're more or less kind of dialed in to a large portion of it. External circumstances, what do you think? 40%, 10%? 40%. 10%. It's 10%. 10%! Only 10% of your happiness is affected by your external circumstances. Holy crap! Now, I find that really encouraging. And that leaves the other 40% up to our actions and our thoughts. So we actually have arguably some influence, like a demonstrable influence on our happiness if we really want to take charge of it. Again, blaze this in your mind. This is a really important research finding here. Let's talk just a bit about, I mentioned the twin studies. We're going to talk about external circumstances. So there's research looking at happiness scores of the highest earners in America, those who earn $10 million or more annually. and their employees. Their happiness scores are actually within 1/10 of a point of each other. So there are other studies, but this kind of leads to the idea that beyond a certain base level of income where our basic life needs are met, additional income doesn't really boost our happiness. Now, it might reduce our stress, it might give us other things, but when it comes to meaning, engagement, and pleasure, it doesn't do much for that. Let's talk about relationships for a second here. Get it? Yeah. So, who thinks that married couples are happier than single people? People who are married are happier than people who are single? Yeah. What about people who think that single people are happier than married people? Yeah, it depends on if you're in a relationship right now or not. Yeah. So what research finds is that they're about the same. There's a peak in happiness for married couples at around year 2 of marriage. And then it fades. Like, different things happen. It doesn't go all the way down to 0, certainly.
What about that study you always hear about, if you're married, people have less heart attacks?
There are health benefits. Yes, for sure. Yes.
So that's not
Mhm.
the same. That's all. That's why.
Mhm.
Just how
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to marriage, for sure, physiologically. And if you have a happy marriage, you might say it's good for me and my happiness. But on average, comparing thousands of subjects over, I think, 5 countries, the average happiness score of married people versus single people is pretty much the same. Again, I'm not discouraging you from being married or saying you shouldn't be single, but these are not direct pathways to happiness, long-term happiness. I want to talk, any questions on this? I'm going to roll through a couple more things, and we're going to get into the meat of the presentation. Good? Okay. So there's also some happiness myths that most of us are aware of, some of us buy into, probably in our weaker moments. One of them is that happiness is actually external to us. And I think you mentioned earlier that, I know happiness is inside of me. But there are a lot of messages around us saying that happiness is out there. It's some destination. It has to do with the trappings of our life. It's actually not true. And the truth about it is that we actually have to take action. As you said earlier, we have ideas before the crowd got here tonight. We want to talk about things and put them into action. Our actions and our thoughts are what determine our happiness. And if you're not happy today, you're probably not going to be happy tomorrow, right? This takes a concerted effort. A second myth is that happiness, again, has to do with changing our external circumstances. This is an attempt to display relative material wealth in 1940 compared to 2010. In 1940, in America, let me see if I get this right, 1/3 of houses had no running water. Only a half had heat in the house. The average income in 2010 dollars was about $16,000. And the average happiness score in 1940, right here, about a 7.5 out of a 10. In 2010, the average home in America had 2 rooms per person, right? We had a lot more space. Our real income doubled. We had about $30,000 per person, average, $33,000. But the average happiness score was actually a little bit lower. This isn't to say there aren't other creature comforts or stress-reducing factors in having some material wealth, but as far as a boost to our happiness, it just isn't going to do it. The third myth is that you either have happiness or you don't, that it's an either-or proposition. And what research shows, and what we'll get into tonight, is that it's really on a continuum, like weight, like temperature, like IQ. There's a whole range and a lot of gradations between one point on the graph and another. So if you're like me, who has a very low kind of genetic propensity for happiness, there's still hope, right? It doesn't mean that you're doomed to be Oscar the Grouch all your life. You can work at it. So I'm guessing you're here because you want to know, well, what do we do with this, right? How do we become happier? So let's get into this. We're going to talk about 7 specific strategies that research shows boost happiness long term. The first one is called Cultivating Your Strengths. In 2004, there were some researchers who developed what's called the Character Strengths and Virtues Classification System. Basically, a catalog of strengths across 40 countries. I wanted to see what are the most commonly endorsed character strengths in these different countries. The overarching virtues that most countries endorse are things like wisdom and courage, humanity, temperance. But these are very different than what you probably heard and what you've heard other people when you hear a resume read out, right? These are not strengths. What Allison read out is just a list of things that I've done that I'm trying to impress you with, but probably don't really speak to who I am as a person. When we know what our character strengths are, and we activate those consciously, very deliberately, and use those in new ways, not the same old ways, but use those in new ways, our happiness score goes up and stays up for a long time. So the first exercise I'm going to lead us through is called the Strengths Introduction. And this is a way for you to find a neighbor, someone maybe you know, maybe someone you don't know. There's even numbers here. This is great, including you and I. We can do this. And in really just a minute, I want you to see if you can describe a little vignette, a little story that captures you at your best. This is not you at your most accomplished necessarily, right? I'm not going to say, well, me at my best is when I graduated with my PhD and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't tell you anything about me as a person or my character, but I want you to do a vignette similar to this. So me at my best might be when I come home from work, I see, I don't know, maybe 5 clients a day. If I have a full caseload, I come home, I listen to a podcast on my drive home for 15 minutes and I just chill out. Because I know as soon as I get home, I'm a dad, and our 2-year-old son is going to want to love on me and play with me, and he's going to be cranky because it's 4:30 and he needs food. So I center myself, I enter the house on a good day, me at my best. I give Rowan some kisses, I say hi to Tara, I pet Bodhi, let Bodhi in the backyard, and I just get on the ground and play with Rowan. Again, not every day, but me at my best. We'll play with blocks. He's learning alphabet letters, so we'll say, what's this letter? A? What's this? B? Right, so we'll do like that for maybe 20 minutes or so. Then we'll transition into dinner time, give him a bath, put his PJs on, read a story, finally put him down to sleep, and then I can relax after that, right? So that's a very short snippet of my life, but I wonder, as I share that with you, do you hear any character strengths? I hope you do. Is there anything about me that's revealed as I share the story of me at my best? Maybe nurturance is a strength.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness.
Maybe self-awareness. Mm-hmm.
Self-forgetfulness.
Sorry?
Yeah. Self-forgetfulness.
Self-forgetfulness. Mm-hmm. Patience. Yeah. I love hearing this. Keep going. Yeah. Great. So this is what I'm going to want you to do. And yeah, I would say those are probably, when I'm at my best, those are strengths that come out pretty easily. What I want you to do is pair up with someone and take about a minute, maybe 2 if you need it, and tell a short vignette. This is me at my best. Maybe something that happened in the last 2 weeks, last month. Don't go way back into like the recesses of your past, but something recent that captures you at your best. And whoever's listening, I want you to try to listen for 2 or 3 strengths. And when the person's done, say, you know what, these are the things that I think I hear in your narrative, right? And then after you do that, switch, take turns, and then we're going to come back and I want you to share a couple of those, and I'm going to tell you another way to really pinpoint your strengths as a homework assignment. Everyone, any questions on this right now? Everyone willing to do it? Need another chocolate? You good? Okay, I'm going to give us 5 minutes at 7:01. Pair up and let's take turns telling a strength. Yeah. I know I'm going to end up cutting a couple people off, but we're going to move forward so that you're not here until 9 p.m. tonight. So who heard strengths that you hadn't thought about in a while? Anyone hear anything that was new to you? Yes? What did you hear?
You told me that one of my strengths is that I value self-care,
Uh-huh.
and I don't really see that in myself a lot of the time.
Ah. So you don't see it in yourself, but do you think it might be true? Or you're not sure about that?
I think it could be true.
Maybe.
I may just ignore that part
Okay.
for some reason.
Yeah. So maybe true, maybe you ignore it, but maybe true. Yeah, anyone else hear anything that seemed new, like news to them? No? What was it like hearing your listening partner reflect some strengths back to you?
That was uncomfortable. It was awkward, and
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to not look where they're telling me.
Yeah.
You can tell me we're not making eye contact.
Yeah. So for Allison, it was a bit uncomfortable and awkward to get the feedback from me. And you were talking to a psychologist, so it's, yeah, it's too bad for you, really. Yeah, yeah. Anyone feel good doing this? You felt kind of good, yeah. My hope is that this can be a small way to remind you that what's really a strength is not necessarily an accomplishment, right? Not a line on your vita or your resume per se, but the strengths about who you are as people are things that can be reflected back by other people, right? And I'll give you a handout at the end of the talk tonight that takes you to this classification system that I referenced earlier that lists, the most common strengths endorsed across 40 countries. And it might still be a free online assessment you can take. You might be put on an email list, but used to be what's through the University of Pennsylvania Positive Psychology Group, which is the kind of research body in the field. And it'll spit out, if you take this assessment, it'll spit out what your top 10 or 20 strengths are, which I think is fun and interesting and hopefully confirming. Hopefully it's not like, oh my, I never knew this about me. I hope you'll know, like, oh yeah, this is a really good representation. But what you do with it is far more important than just seeing it on paper. What you need to do with this is implement this. And the challenge on the sheet I'll give you is to use your strengths in new ways in the next week, right? So to think about what was reflected back to you. Is self-care a strength of yours? Is humility, is ambition a strength of yours? If you use that in a new way, you're going to be more conscious of that as a strength, right? And you probably have better effect with it too. And I would be delighted to hear from you to know how that boosts your happiness. So that's homework assignment number 1 on crash course number 1 called Cultivating Your Strengths. Any questions on this before we roll into the second strategy? No? Okay. I will say there's a strength, right? Yeah, courage. That I am quite aware, and I hope it's pretty clear to you, that there is a depth of research behind each of these topics, and we're just touching the very surface of it. If you'd like resources to look into later on, shoot me an email. I'll send you a book list that I have, and you can really do some deep diving with it. Okay. The second strategy for cultivating long-term happiness is practicing gratitude. When we're talking about gratitude, I think of like big gratitude and little gratitude. Big gratitude being, I am so blessed to be alive. I'm so glad I have a partner who loves me. I'm so thankful for having a son who's sweet and cuddly. These things that are really just touching and warming that, oh my gosh, who wouldn't be utterly grateful for something like that? But there's also little gratitude, like, oh, I'm so glad I get chocolate tonight. I'm so glad I got to meet Allison. She's so friendly. Well, how charming. Little things during the day that we can also focus on. When we focus on what we're grateful for, our mood goes up. There's a website called thanks.com, but it's thx.com. Has anyone heard of this? Thanks.com. It's really, really kind of fun. Leah is the woman who created this, and she, for years, wrote on Post-it notes these very absurd and kind of cheeky gratitude statements, and then she posted on her website. But it was her way of activating gratitude without having to be in this big, esoteric, grateful space, but just like, what's happening today that I can kind of use as a springboard for being grateful. So this one says, Dear Friday, thanks for sounding like an excuse to eat potatoes cooked in oil. Love, Leah. Right. Dear consecutive days without email, Facebook, Instagram, or text messages, thank you for being the real vacation. Sun, sand, and rum-based cocktails are grand, but it's your absence, social networking, that truly refreshes me. All the best, Leah. Okay? Let's see what the next... So I would like for our next exercise to be writing a thanks Post-it note. I didn't bring Post-it notes, so I'm going to give you these handouts now. If you got pens, I'd like you to try to write one thank you note. It can be big gratitude if you want. Thank you, Mother, for being so tender and sweet. It could be something about an inanimate object or something that you just stumbled across today. But I'd like you to practice writing a gratitude statement out, and then we're going to share a couple of those. Okay, anyone have a thank you that they would care to share with the group tonight? Yes, go right ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Whitney, for cluing me in about homeless sock monkeys in Asheville. You have given me years of laughter. Last door's former sock monkey CEO.
Clearly an inside joke. Sounds delightful. Yeah. Yeah.
Sock monkeys.
Homeless sock monkeys. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have a thank you note that they care to share with the group here? Yeah.
Dear Hoodie, thanks for holding safe space for my mind and concealing headphones back in my years of school.
Yeah. Did everyone hear that? Dear Hoodie. Can you read it a little bit louder? It's really great.
Dear Hoodie, thank you for holding safe space for my mind and concealing headphones back in my years of schooling.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have one they care to share? Yeah, please.
Thank you for my son's desires to spend time with me, Casablanca.
Thank you for my son's desires to spend time with me. Yeah. Great. So when we feel grateful, we can do 3 things with it. We can think about it, or we can contemplate our gratitude. And that's nice. We get a little warm fuzzy in our own head. The next step is that we can actually write it down, what you're doing in here. So you externalize the gratitude just a little bit. A third thing you can do with gratitude, if you really want to take on a big challenge, and I encourage you to do this, is to actually think about it, write about it, and then share it directly with someone. Not merely in post-it note form. What I'm talking about is actually a gratitude letter. And there's instructions on the handout. This would be, I'll tell you how I've done this before. In my life, I took this exercise on. I had a need in my life years ago and reached out to a friend who visited me for the weekend. And years later, I wrote to this friend and I said, I wrote this letter, and then I called her up and I said, Carrie, I need 5 minutes of your time. I just need to read something to you. And I read her my letter of gratitude, which I don't know if it was very, very eloquent, but it was to the point, right? I was in a time of need and you were there for me, and it really, really brought me to a place I needed to be. Thank you so much. And I read this letter to her, and then there was just radio silence on the phone. And then you could hear sniffles, right? And it was hard to tell who was crying first, right? It was just so touching for both of us to share that moment. And this is what gratitude can do if you really want to bring it home, is you can make this a part of your regular, or at least an interaction that you have with someone who's close to you, right? When we get, I think as you were saying, Allison, when we get like below the resume, when we get to the real connection with other people, it does something for us and it does something for them. And so gratitude really goes both ways if you want to activate it and share it with somebody. Yeah. We're going to touch on a couple of aspects of what you said in the next example about when to use this, how to really capitalize on the benefits you can get from an exercise like this. I want to show you real quickly what I think is a fun, touching video. This is Mama Hill. Is anyone familiar with Mama Hill? If you're not, Google Mama Hill. Mama Hill. She's got a fascinating story. This is a clip. She took a happiness questionnaire that Soul Pancake was giving out, and she just kind of rocked it. And they wanted to know, how are you so happy? And this is her way of explaining happiness in her life.
Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on.
Okay.
These surveys that we gave you, they're designed to measure basically how happy you are. You scored a perfect score, higher than anybody that we've given this test to since we've been doing this. It's really quite remarkable.
Good.
I think we're all anxious to know, why do you think that is?
Well, I'll give you a very brief little summary of what I do every morning when I wake up. I wake up and I say, this day I choose to be happy, well, and complete. That's first. I thank God for letting me get up. Then I thank God for the fact that I have running water in a toilet. I have soap. I have toothpaste. There are people in the world who don't have any of those things. And for food. Because sometimes we get them, I don't think I can make it today. I don't think I'm going to. But we have to realize that we are truly blessed. Then I thank God for peace in my house. I have a peaceful house, and I meditate. And then after I meditate and have my prayer, I just say, okay, God, how may I serve you today, and who can I help today? And finally, I watch cartoons. And when I watch the cartoons, I wait for the answers, I just ask. And that's a very happy, beautiful day for me, because I don't have cartoons never have a problem. There's always an end to it, right? Something good happens at the end, and I have several cartoons that I watch until my day begins. And so therefore, I don't have an attitude. I'm glad to be here.
I think you just told us in 2 minutes more than any of the studies we've looked over have. So I'd really like to thank you for coming in today and just generally doing fantastic work for helping out the children that you do and for having a fantastic attitude. Thank you so much for coming in, Mama Hill.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, so clearly for some people, like their faith is a big part of how they experience gratitude. That doesn't have to be the case for you, but I think I find her attitude just utterly compelling and really charming. What would it be like if I did this every day? For 3 days in a row? I mean, not even a lifetime. What if I did this? What if you did this just for a few days? What would that do for you?
Instead of putting a pillow over your head.
Yeah, I don't want to get out. It's like, oh, wow, I'm alive. Oh my goodness, what a miracle. Yeah.
I like the cartoon part.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's very selective about the inputs and at that part of the day. She's not, maybe she does, but she's not saying she goes to the New York Times and reads the opinions, or, she's not crashing on the news necessarily. She's taking in information that really is consistent with the mood she wants to cultivate, which seems to be a mood of openness and appreciation. Right? Okay. So that's gratitude. I'm realizing that we got a lot to get through in a short amount of time, so I'm going to try to truck it a little bit here. The next habit of happy people is thinking optimistically. I'm going to suggest that this does not have to be an overhaul of your mental process. If you're not an automatically optimistic, kind of cheerful person, there's a really simple, elegant exercise similar to what you were just describing called 3 Good Things. Anyone heard of 3 Good Things? You might have done this kind of spontaneously on your own, where at the end of every day, for a week, like no more than a week, you write down 3 good things you experienced that day. And then you write down next to those 3 good things an attribution. Why did I actually experience this thing, right? So you can imagine this actually being 2 columns, what happened, and then my attribution for why that happened. Your attributions could be, well, I was lucky, or it was the weather, or I don't know, my wife did it, or my partner did this, or it might be personal. Well, maybe my 3 good things, one of them might be I enjoyed quality time with my son. Well, why did that happen? Either external, he was in a good mood, Tara fed him at the right intervals, he had enough playtime, or maybe I would say, well, because I'm a decent dad, or I really love him, or I might make an internal attribution. Neither which is better or worse, but what people find is that the more you can make a genuine internal attribution for good things, the more you feel agency. You feel like you actually can create positive experiences in your life. And if you do this in the evening before you go to bed, it likely will have an improvement to your sleep quality and your sleep duration. You might wake a little bit more rested. Your mind will be a little bit more oriented to scanning for positives the next day, especially if you do this for a week and you're going to revisit this every night. The more you scan for positives, the more you're going to pick up. The more you pick up and make internal attributions, the more you're going to feel like you can create positive experiences in your life. And it creates this upward spiral very quickly. There's some research suggesting that this, as a standalone intervention for people who are going through depression, reduces depressive symptoms for 6 months after they do this week-long exercise, which I find really a bit hard to believe, but pretty compelling, right? So I would suggest, depressed or not, if you're interested in boosting your mood, try this for a week. Try it for 3 days. See what happens. Okay. And like before, as I mentioned, if you want to do a deep dive into the literature and the understanding of positive thinking and studies around that, let me know. I'm happy to geek out with you on the details around that. The 4th habit is called living in the present, and this is where your chocolates are going to come in handy. If you need a chocolate, I want everyone to have a chocolate in their hand. Who needs a chocolate and doesn't have access to one? Find one in the chair next to you, and I've got a whole bag if you need it. Yeah? Here's a, you have one? Here, pass them around.
Thank you.
Yeah. Got one? Okay. Has anyone done any mindful exercises? Mindfulness meditation? Yeah. Have you ever done like this raisin exercise? Savoring? Okay, so this might be familiar to some of you. I want to show you this beautiful picture as a way to kind of remind you to be in the moment and to savor what's about to happen before it actually happens. Okay. So, eating, being aware of what's happening as it's happening is a way to really capture the enjoyment and pleasure of an experience. Eating for most of us, I'll just say eating for me, is a very hurried, often like utilitarian experience. I need calories, I need certain foods, I'm just going to put it in my mouth, digest it, and then move on with my day. But we could actually slow down around eating, and if you like chocolates, I'm going to invite us to do a brief mindfulness exercise around chocolate, and I want to know at the end of it if it was any different than how, if your experience of pleasure in eating this is any different than your experience when you just gobble down chocolate ordinarily. So I'd like you to try to follow my instructions. First of all, look at this beautiful purple chocolate wrapper in your hand, and just let your eyes delight or even just be curious about this thing that you're holding. Notice the shape, notice the colors, notice the weight. Right? Maybe put it up to your ear. What's it sound like when you really give it that kind of attention? Okay? What happens when you open it up? You can do as I'm doing. Right? Open it up and see what the wrapper feels like in your fingertips as you're opening this up. Now you've got a chocolate in your hand. I'm interested in mine. I'm going kind of quickly here. Yeah. What do you see? Do you ever just look at a Hershey Kiss? It's a really fascinating shape. I'm not going to tell you, I guess it's your experience here. I want you to take a minute and just be immersed in this thing if you can be. And I'm not going to eat this because I can't talk as I'm eating, but I will say, put it in your mouth. See, and try not to eat it as you usually do, whatever that is. See if you can just take your time with this experience. Notice the flavors, notice what happens to the chocolate as it just sits there in your mouth. Notice what your mouth wants to do. Just bring your awareness to this whole, someone's chewing. I see people chewing chocolate already. You can't help it, can you? Yeah. What happens if you slow down just a little bit right now? I'm going to encourage you to savor this as long as you can. Finish it when you want to finish it. And when you're all done, I'd love to know, what was this experience like for you? What's it like to go a little bit more slowly with eating a Hershey's Kiss than as you probably typically do? Would anyone say that it tastes any different? It's richer. Has anyone looked at a Hershey's Kiss that way before? No? What did you notice?
The paper went all the way underneath the chocolate.
Yeah, the little thing, yeah. It was all the way underneath that. Yeah, I didn't notice that before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's it like to slow down and do this? Is it weird? Does it feel okay?
It made me think about when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
I went to the kiddie show, except for the kiddie show, after the cartoons, they had 2 feature films, and all the kids had one Charms lollipop, which we made last through the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
So it took me back.
I bet that was a delicious lollipop. Yeah, you really savored it.
Yes, we had
Yeah,
to.
you had to. Wonderful example. Yeah. Any other comments? If you, yeah.
I noticed the texture changed as I usually would chew through it, and so with it melting, and it kind of becomes like fudgesicle-like
Yeah.
in a way that I don't normally let it get to that point. And so it
Yeah.
makes me wonder what other experiences would change if I slowed down enough to experience them more fully and more slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to try to repeat that a little bit just for the sake of picking up on the video. That as you slowed down, you noticed you noticed that you had a different experience of this chocolate in its different forms and states, right? The texture of it shifted a little bit. Something that you might not experience if you just kind of chomp through it in regular life. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I didn't eat mine because I'm fasting.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a chocoholic.
Ah.
So no chocolate makes it into my hand and doesn't get eaten under normal circumstances.
Ah.
So to not eat it was more interesting than to eat it.
What did you notice to not eat it?
I noticed that I have the freedom to do that.
Ah.
That it doesn't have to be compulsive,
Mm.
which it usually is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I wasn't fasting, I would have eaten this one and sit there.
Yeah.
Pass that over.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
it's nice to feel the restraint of it.
Yeah. Did you say freedom? Like you notice you have freedom in this?
Restraint.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. That's a wonderful example. Yeah, thanks for
In fact,
sharing
the
that.
tiger might not eat the piglet.
You don't know. He might just be licking his chops. I think so. Yeah. Let's think happy thoughts about these.
You're welcome. That's how I
Yeah. So there is there are some instructions on your homework sheet, on your handout, for how to savor events in the present. I think there's some information about how to savor or kind of relish past moments and extract even more pleasure and satisfaction from those. I will say I do this as a new dad who's in love with my sweet little boy. When I have a moment, I like just to look at pictures. And today I was looking at pictures from a year ago. And does anyone have children in here? No, some do. Has anyone seen a kid? You know how sweet they look? Yeah. Or have been in a relationship and love someone. And yeah, it's like when you go back, you get to live it again in a way. It's really amazing. So this is another habit that's really accessible to us. You don't need chocolate. You can have your own memory as your tool. But by really honing in on the experience, savoring that lollipop for the full movie, we coax a lot of pleasure out of an ordinary moment. Investing in social connections is another strategy. This does not mean having 3,000 Facebook friends, although that might be useful for some people, but it really means capitalizing on the relationships that you have. There's a few strategies that I'm just going to mention quickly, and then we're going to do what I think will be a helpful exercise. Let me say to pause at 7:35. Is it all right with y'all if I go another 5 minutes? Okay with that? 5, 10? Yeah, 20? Well, let me ask you, how do you invest in your social connections? What do you do to really make your relationships, I don't want to say stellar, but really, really meaningful, engaging experiences for you? How do you do that? Eye contact. Speaking in person, eye contact, yeah. Again, I'm repeating just for the sake of the video. Yeah.
And I spend an enormous amount of time, I always pick up the phone. School calls. You know, if it's someone I know, especially like my close friends who are having issues, I think that's important, just to be there.
Just to pick up the phone, especially with a close friend. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of time to do hands-on because I take care of my parents, but I always pick up the phone.
Yeah, I want to make that connection. Thank you. Yeah. Who else? What else do you do to cultivate your relationships?
Before I get into some sort of social situation, I make sure to get my work complete so I can actually be present with people.
Okay.
Because if I didn't finish what I needed to do and I had the opportunity to finish it, I'll just eat away at myself and not be fully present with people because I'm still where I was
Yeah, so your mind is on a prior task until you get it done. And then once you're saying, I think, you try to be intentional to get your work done out of the way so you can be really present with the person that you're with.
Yeah, and when I'm not able to, when that wasn't my fault that I wasn't able to finish, being able to mindfully transition into a new place, realizing that was there,
Uh-huh.
now here,
Yeah.
and show up. Like what you were saying when you listen to your podcast and come home
Yeah.
with your child.
Yeah. Being mindful to make it.
Transitioning into that next space.
Yeah.
Not bringing where you were at, bringing the stresses of 5 minutes ago into the next moment.
Trying to make a distinction between that moment and the stressors there and this moment, or the moment that's coming up with somebody else. Being present, yeah, you see how these things start to weave in on each other. For those of you who might be familiar with marital research, John Gottman is a kind of prolific writer and researcher. He studied happy married couples and unhappy married couples. And his research suggests that there's a 5-to-1 ratio of perceived positive events in happy marriages to perceived negative events. 5-to-1. 5-to-1, which seems like kind of a big task, actually, as a married person, to have at least 5 positive for every negative. But most of us train onto the negatives in our lives pretty easily. And ruptures in relationship can have a stronger impact than positive moments in relationships. So as you think about whether you're married or have a friend or a partner, whoever you're close to, making sure that there's a reservoir in the bank of events, a positive kind of balance in your account, so to speak, is really important for relationships. Related to that comes the exercise we're going to do. There's a lot of research in psychology and psychotherapy about being there when people are down, being empathic. Oh, that must hurt so bad. Oh, I'm so, be real tender towards people. And it's really helpful when someone recognizes our pain and can be present. But it's also really helpful to recognize someone's positive mood and affirm that and really tune into that too. There's a style describing that. It's called active constructive responding. And you can imagine on this grid, these are constructive responses, these are destructive responses, active and passive responses. So when we're capitalizing on good news, an active constructive response is authentic, it's enthusiastic, it's supportive, it wants more, wants to really expand that event. So if Allison says to me, what's something good you did? Or can I put you on the spot? No, that's fair. Who has a positive event that happened to them in the last week? Something that they're really pleased about. Get a good grade or get a raise or have a good moment with someone in their life? Yeah.
Allison offered to help me out at work actually this week
Ah.
when I was really stressed out. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Allison offered to help you out. That was a good thing. So an active constructive response would be like, and what's your name? Ela. Like, Ela, oh my gosh, that's really awesome. Tell me more about that. Right? And you'd tell me more, and I'd be like, oh, well, how did you do that? Or how did you and Allison set that up? Right? If it's genuine, you're probably gonna want to share more and feel more connected. A passive constructive response would be like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. And the conversation's gonna end right about there, right? An active destructive would be saying something negative or pointing out the flaws, like, well, Allison really can't keep this up very long, so don't expect it moving forward. And then a passive destructive response is just ignoring it. You tell me this good news, Ela, and I'm like, yeah, well, it's going to snow in a few days, so, let's get ready for that. Okay. I would like 5 volunteers to stand up here to help bring this to life with a new example. Come on up. We'll just do it real quickly. 5 people. Okay. So I'm going to just say, let's start with you. Someone in the audience is going to tell a positive event, and your job, sir, is to give an active constructive response, which is genuine, it's enthusiastic, you want to know more about it. Okay? Your job is to give a passive constructive response, and you can look behind you to cheat. It's like you're giving support, but you're really not that into it. Like, that's cool, or something like that. Your job is to give an active destructive response. This is fun, right? This is where you point out the negative in the positive. you discount it in some way, you dismiss it. And your job is to give a passive destructive. You just get to be so disinterested it's painful to see, right? Yeah. So I would like, thank you so much, someone else to volunteer just to share a bit of good news that happened to them in the last week.
Oh, okay, my car got totaled, and the insurance guy gave me an extra $1,000.
Wow. Okay. How would you respond to that?
Kidding.
Yeah.
An extra $1,000?
Yeah,
How lucky is
I
that?
think so.
I mean, you could have had 100
He
insurance
could have
adjusters,
just stuck
nobody
with the
would have
lower
done that.
amount, because he offered me one amount, and then I don't know, he forked over another 1,000.
That's awesome. What are you going to do with the money?
Well, I had to buy another car.
Yeah, but you got an extra 1,000.
Yeah, great, great. Really prolonging this, like, oh, this is really good stuff. Let's get into it. Okay, now can you just share the same thing with the second person here?
Oh, my car got totaled, and the insurance adjuster offered me one amount, and then he gave me another 1,000.
That's pretty fortunate.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
You, so.
Yeah, something's happening to you right now. Good. Can you share it with the third person here?
My car got totaled, and I got offered one amount to replace my car, and then I talked them into giving me another 1,000 to replace my car.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, but you totaled your car. Now you gotta go look for a car. And what is $1,000 gonna do to replace it? That's not anything in this day and age.
Yeah, I know, it still didn't cover the cost of getting a new car.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's like, well, you'd think an insurance company could do a little more than that.
Yeah, wah. Yeah, dead in the water right there. Okay, last time. Yeah, You start to pull back, right? This is not a conversation you want to have.
What, with her?
Yeah, you're looking scared. Yeah.
Push it away.
And can you say it for the last person here?
So my car got totaled, and they offered me one amount, and then somehow, the guy agreed to give me another 1,000 to buy a new car.
Well, it's really cold outside today.
Yeah. Thank you, volunteers. Thank you, and thank you, all of you. Yeah. So when you were gracious enough to put yourself in the hot seat here, who did you really want to engage with?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Felt good, right?
You did a nice job of that. Yeah. So we can really bring some intention. I find this personally most difficult with the people that I know the best, because I'm personally, I think, more conditioned to their demeanors than anyone else's, right? So my wife, my friend, oh, I have good news. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, okay, right? But what if I could say to Tara, my wife, oh my God, you met that friend for coffee? You had that conversation? Oh, that must be so great for you. Tell me all about it. Like, how do you... If her bullshit meter doesn't go off the rails,
What'd you do today?
I know. It might do something to our relationship if I can respond like that. So as another bit of homework for you, consider who in your life you can do this with over the next week. Or look for opportunities, I should say. Look for opportunities to really capitalize and prolong good news when you hear it. I'm just going to point out the next two. We're not going to do these in here. Taking care of your body and soul is a very shorthand way of saying exercise, find a spiritual practice, do things that really stir your sense of spirit and health.
Tibetan Buddhist monk?
I'm not sure, but I just thought he was a lovely man. Yeah, who would seem to have a meditation or spiritual practice, right? Yeah. The last one is called Committing to Your Goals. It's a really, I think, nice exercise on the homework sheet. It talks about writing essentially an epitaph for yourself now, right? Imagine what it would be like if 8 generations down the line knew of you. What would you like your lasting impression to be? And doing this is not so much to be a morbid exercise, but to say, these are my highest values, these are my strongest strengths, these are the essential bits of my life that I'd like to be remembered. And if you can articulate those, my guess is you're going to try to activate those
now while you're still living. Let's see. So what's the secret to happiness? Is it outside? Is it down the road? It's Calvin and Hobbes, yeah, yeah. I know, you want to read that, right? Yeah. Resolutions, me? What are you implying, that I need to change? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm perfect the way I am. Yeah, not quite. So the secret to happiness is that it's really available to all of us, all the time. We just have to work at it. And working at it actually is as simple as doing some of the things that we did today. This is not rocket science, but it does require just a little bit of intention and a little bit of practice. And I believe, we'll just end with that. There's a video I could show later, but if you have questions, I'm happy to stay, as long as y'all want to stay and ask questions and talk about this. But if you have follow-up questions down the road, or if you try any of these things and want to let me know how it went, shoot me an email. My information is on the cards there. I'd be really thrilled to hear if this has an impact on your life. Thanks for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. Are there any questions? Any? Yeah.
So, I would categorize life into sort of three sections. One is, great things happen. One is just sort of life in its routine state.
Yeah.
And then the last one is really unfortunate things happen. What are your thoughts about maintaining happiness or finding a way to be happy when really unfortunate things happen?
Yeah. So the idea is that life you can kind of categorize as being comprised of very great things that happen, ordinary life events, and then very bad things that happen. And how does this stuff apply when really bad things happen? Is that a fair question?
I prefer the word unfortunate to really bad.
Unfortunate. Okay. Unfortunate events happen in one's life. Yeah. What the research suggests is that humans have this unbelievable ability to adapt to our circumstances. We were laughing earlier, a few of us, about adapting to weather patterns, having lived in the Midwest versus living in the South, or living in a very, very humid and hot climate. But the same happens with emotional experiences, that by and large, whether we, and I actually want to make sure I'm citing this to you because it comes pretty much straight from a research study. So there is, from most events in life, positive and negative, there's this amplification or deceleration of happiness, right? The event happens, we get married, we win the lottery, whatever, boom. Or we get in an accident, we lose a limb, we have a significant loss, boom, our happiness plummets. We return to baseline. Most of us, most of the time, naturally will return to baseline. It'll take work, it takes community support, but we have a propensity to adapt, and the term around it is called hedonic adaptation, meaning kind of an adaptation to pleasure or lack of pleasure, that we find a way to recalibrate to that. There are two known, and if you've had any personal losses, you could add to this list, but two very well-documented events that really undercut a person's happiness for years on end. And this would be loss of a spouse and loss of a job. I would imagine there are other things in there, right? Loss of a child or something that's really devastating. The research suggests that for people who lose a spouse, it takes a good 5 to 8 years to come back to their baseline, whatever their baseline level of happiness was. And for loss of a job, even after they return to the workplace, it can take years for their sense of happiness to really kind of solidify again. It's just such a jarring experience. But those, as the standout examples, really suggest that for most other things, even with very unfortunate events, most of us will naturally kind of gravitate back to whatever our baseline was. These are great. Other thoughts, other questions? Be in touch. I so enjoyed having you here tonight. There's extra chocolate if you want it. Please take it. Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.